Page. So the fact that I think it's one fact that you touched upon which I really like. I think most of the things that are happening wrong to the environment is because of the convenience factor. We have to move out of a convenience to do something for the planet. And like you said, if the bags were not good looking, like the first time I saw your bags, I was like, yeah, these can be carried as well in a trendy way, because most of the youth wants to carry stuff which looks good. Like they don't want to carry a jute ka thela, which is like rough to carry and not easy to carry. So I think while keeping in mind that we need sustainable alternatives, we need to make sure that they are in line with the requirements and convenience as much as possible. I'm not saying it will be 100% convenient, but the percentage can be reduced as much as possible. So now, like I had promised earlier, I'll put up a couple of questions for the panel and they can answer quickly. And after that, we would love to open it for the audience, because this is the first session when we'll have the audience asking questions as well. So very quickly, you guys have the mic with you? One is there, you just have one. Okay, so my first question is, and maybe we can just have one line answer from everyone, is that what do you think are the top strategies? So you can tell one strategy each to drive circular economy in India. What do you think is the top number? And that strategy could be an organizational strategy, a government strategy, or some radical change that we need. What should be that strategy that should change the face of circular economy in India? And you could be as blunt as to what do you feel as should be there and it's not there.
So I know this is maybe not the answer that he's looking for, and I thought it was a great inspirational thought on my part where I said circular economy to hamara past hai. My t-shirt was the t-shirt that my father wore when I was a kid. Then I wore his t-shirt, and then my younger brother wore my t-shirt. Then it became कपड़ा जिससे डस्टिंग होती थी, फिर कपड़ा जिससे गाड़ी पहुंचते थे, फिर वो पोछा बना, फिर भी फेंका नहीं गया जब फट गया था, बिकॉज दूसरा पोछा उससे अटैच होगा तो अच्छा होगा पोछा, right? So I think it's not as much a strategy level thing as if we really just go back to our past and it's what you said, right? That convenience came in because of plastic. Before the age of plastic, when we used to go in Gujarat, we'd go to buy amras because it's a really big deal, right? And kabhi dabba nahi hota tha, steel ka dabba leke jate the. So I'm saying the circular economy is literally everything that's there in our past. Like Dr. Mawar had said, right? वो साड़ी का curtain बनता है, फिर curtain का dusting बनता है, and that's what circular economy is.
Exactly. I would love to hear from others as well as to what they think. Should be, I'm just looking for, maybe it could be one word, if you don't want to point out specifically.
No, the reason why you're talking about circular economy and all is because we have never looked at it from a business angle. Today it's not even an industry, formally recognized industry. So if we are really talking about bringing up change, calling it a mass movement and all, it should first be recognized as an industry.
Very true.
So that's where the main strategic change from the government also should happen, I believe.
Sure. I was talking to a friend in Singapore the other day, and they said that when they register a company there is a category called social enterprise, and we don't have anything like that. Hence, no category, no special benefits, so no special arrangements, and so I think that recognition needs to be there.
Yes.
So I completely agree with you. Lakshmi, would you like to add something? Okay, Rhea.
So I think from my experience and what I've seen in the last 10 years is that you have, entrepreneurs, MSMEs, SMEs that kind of adopt the circular economy model, right? And what I would want to see going forward is larger scale companies sort of collaborating with people like us, right? So whether it was integrating what we're doing into their supply chain, whether it was, a funding, mentoring, training program, or if it was collaborating to help support just, national campaigns or lobbying, or because I think, we've all had, at some point we've all tried to create an impact, right? An individual impact. We are 1.3 billion people. So I think at some level we would need a larger vehicle to kind of help us escalate and build on that momentum. So yeah, I think it would be great if you saw larger enterprises kind of supporting people like us and our businesses.
Definitely. And I think investing the effort as well as money to derive, whether it's collection of plastic through EPR, whether it's collection of e-waste through EPR. There is another EPR that I'll propose later in the day. I'll not say right now, it's a surprise. But the point is, I think enforcement is the key. We talk big things in government forums, in forums like these, and when we do the white paper, I think that's what is going to be one of the key points, is what is being done for the reinforcement. Similar, like EPR and CSR, even though are very different, but they could be as ineffective as CSR. Because CSR in India, in a lot of cases, is a greenwash. Right? And so we have to ensure that CSR is not just the rotation of the 2% of the budget, but the actual work on the ground. Right? And again, because that is, even though KPMG publishes this report every year of the top 100 companies and the details of what they do in the CSR, but the point is, those are just top 100. And even those top 100, it clearly says, oh, these 20% have not done anything, and the entire 2% budget has carried forward to the next year. What happens next year? It carried forward again. So,
can I add?
Yes, please.
I
tend to talk a lot at times, sorry.
I think I agree with all of them. I feel also that we tend to take different measures at different times, and we don't support it from different levels. So I feel a synchronized multi-level strategy is very much required. Like, for example, just as you mentioned, when a ban is enforced, it needs to be supplemented with providing an alternative, and that alternative being available at a lot of places, and synchronized awareness movements that tend towards pushing people from switching from single-use plastics towards the alternative. So it all has to happen in synchrony, and I feel, adding to what you mentioned, that working towards that synchrony is very important.
For us to teach them value as well. I was listening to the gentleman before us talk about pencils, and and that hits home, because it's very easy for my kids to say, oh, Mom, I want more pencils, I want more crayons. And you're like, hang on, you haven't even finished. And honestly, you don't. And it's very easy, and we want this aspirational life. And you're like, you need to take a step back and really kind of teach them about what matters the most, basically. So, yeah.
And at any point of time, I think the future generation is already smarter than all of us. A lot of times, because most of our campaigns are around, these green stars and budding stars, they come in and they are talking about EPR and how microplastics are entering our food chain. Like, I get surprised and I get also very happy at the same time. I think what we are struggling to tell our current generation, the future generation is already ahead of it, and I think that's how generally it happens. The future generations are genetically smarter than us. At the same time, I think when you mentioned the point of the naming and shaming and the reactions coming out quickly, I've seen, there are different ways that it works on social media as well. So, like, I'll give you an example, about a campaign which is called #IsThisYours, right? So we were also participating in such a campaign, and we were able to reach 5 million people in a week. But the point is, 90% of people, I think, still don't understand. And what you're asking for is that we're just asking them to take responsibility of post-consumer plastic waste. And they're like, it's your mistake that you littered it. The point is, whether I litter it or put it in the recycle bin, if it is not recyclable, it is not recyclable. So you got to be taking the responsibility, as all the enterprises, FMCG companies, they need to stand up and make sure, even though EPR is being enforced now, that they switch to eco-friendly alternatives as soon as possible. So that's the ask really for such campaigns. So it takes time to go to that level, but I think, yes, social media has given us a platform to gain mass movements and gain the attention very quickly. At the same time, a lot of people misinterpret it as well. So I think, but yes, another example you gave, compostable. Right? So a lot of people with compostable, they don't understand they are setting bio-oxo-degradable stuff, which requires special conditions to break down. And India does not have that facility. So an actual compostable needs a lot of education effort. Like, so people need to understand what is the actual definition of compostable, that can it break down in natural environment.
To stop people from littering and getting them to segregate at source, and both of them requires people to take initial responsibility.
So tell me this, and why does it happen that in Bangalore people segregate and in Delhi people don't care?
I'm not been in Delhi much to answer that.
I'm a Delhiite, I'm telling you. Why? So you tell me, why do people in Bangalore segregate? I'll tell you about Delhi.
I think it's because there is a collective push amongst people, and people have made it a conscious choice to educate others who don't do it. And I think that constant reinforcement is particularly required to make it a habit. and I think that's
Is it
more or
also
less
some push from the
effective
government?
in Bangalore.
Is it also some push from the government
Not
and the
much.
municipal corporation? No.
No.
So it's happening as a motivation.
Yes, much of the communities which are more conscious push the others too.
So the crux is that nothing is going to help in Delhi until people themselves want to do it.
Yes. So that's what we keep telling, like with the citizen participation which is there in Bangalore, and if we team up with a good municipality, that will be like the best city to live in if that happens. Because citizen participation I've seen is the best in Bangalore. After having traveled all across the country, I want to go back to Bangalore because of that reason. That's what
I'm glad to hear that. I think the things to learn from, it's not Bangalore versus Delhi, honestly, for
Yeah,
everyone.
it's
It's about
not that.
how we can learn things from each other as a city. That's the only thing I'm trying to bring.
Totally agree.
Great.
So,
Your top challenge.
other than the awareness I think is a common thing across for all of us who are trying to do something different. In addition to that, like if you talk about just the work that we are trying to do at Imagine, for us the other challenge is getting clean waste. Clean waste. So that is always a challenge for us.
So,
So yeah, pre-consumer waste is still okay, but post-consumer waste, it's a nightmare to deal with when we try upcycling that. So that is one more challenge I would say.
okay, understood. Udit?
Awareness, number one. Number two, I think the biggest challenge I have otherwise is to create eco-friendly products that are really good looking and yet cost effective. Because the idea is that not a lot of people might not pick up a bag in a store because it is eco-friendly.
Yes.
But if I can give the same quality, the same kind of bag, whether it's a laptop bag or a simple grocery bag, in a similar cost and as attractive, then people would love to buy it. But if I put a 25% premium on it, then it won't work. So I think that our biggest challenge is to develop products that people want to use, not have to use.
I think the target, I completely agree with you. I think the target as an industry who's trying to drive sustainability on the table and otherwise in the crowd as well, is that if we are able to create alternatives for everything on the shelf, which is better looking and cost effective, you won the battle. If everything on the shelf currently is for ₹5 and you create your options for 4.5, you won the game. Education takes a backseat then. I'll just come back to you. But the point is, getting there is the challenge. How do you bring down the cost from the existing one? Because that industry has existed for decades. There is scale in that industry, and that's why it's so cheap. But in order to achieve that in the industry that we guys are talking about, I think it's going to take some time, and that's where education plays a role. As to more people wanting to do it, give scales to companies who are trying to do work like that, and that makes it more cost effective. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think that part of the education process should also be that, good looking isn't always the best option.
Yeah.
Whether you're looking at organic food, right, your polished dals versus, the true natural stuff, or your jams, or, because I've been on other food panels with the likes of Fab India and stuff like that, and that's always a challenge, because it's like, but this doesn't look as nice, and you're like, well, and I think that needs to be part of the education process. There is a huge, I don't know whether you've read this, but quite recently they did an article on the number of vegetables that are wasted. I mean, perfectly good vegetables, but because they're not good looking, they're not picked, right?
Yes.
So I think that needs to be part of the education process too.
Definitely, understood. Yeah, I think from a product perspective, it looks still matter a lot. But let's say when you're talking about maybe fashion or the food industry, that needs more of awareness as to what are the ingredients and what is the impact versus how does it look really. Okay, great. So thanks for answering those questions. We now quickly, do we have mics for people on the floor? Okay. Okay, let's start off. We'll have first question here. Just be a little loud. Yeah, please.
My question is to Rhea and Udit both, because you guys use the term called compostable. I'm aware your cutlery is a bioplastic product.
I don't use any bioplastic at all.
It's an industrial compostable or home compostable?
Home compostable. My products have there's no element of
I know your
plastic.
tableware does not. I'm asking about the cutlery.
The cutlery is made out of birch wood that we source out in Uttarakhand.
Okay.
So there is no...
Then it basically is mixed with resin. Alright, but when you guys use terms like compostable, do you also differentiate between home compostable and industrial compostable?
Yes.
Ours aren't home compostable yet. They're
All right.
industrial.
In that case, it's an industrial compostable bioplastic bag, the one that you use for packaging. Correct? Bioplastic in itself is going to be another waste stream that will get generated as a result of.
Right, but when you say bioplastic,
Please
what?
let me finish my question.
Sorry, I'm asking for a clarification in the
Yeah,
question. What is the bioplastic? What do you mean by bioplastic?
Bioplastic is any product which is not. There's 4 different types, right? There's one which is using renewable material instead of oil to create a normal plastic. So it's still plastic, it's just made from plant-based waste or whatever instead of oil, right? There's another kind which is something like, when people said, somebody mentioned wheat, starch, corn, sort of a product. When actually and it says, so the standards in India sadly are 60% compostability, which means as long as your bag by weight is 40% plastic and 60% that plant starch, it's fine. We will pass it off as compostable. So good for the environment. When actually that bag will in all practical purposes, because all of us know what happens to waste here, will land up either in the land to look at a normal plastic looking bag because it looks and feels like plastic, to put it with wet waste. When they are actually explicitly told wet waste mein newspaper ke alawa nothing else will go. So that will again go into dry waste. Best case scenario into plastic recycling, where it will actually render the entire batch of recycled plastic useless, and that entire batch of recycled plastic will now sit in landfills because the formulation changed. That's a second type of bioplastic. The third type of bioplastic, which is the one that you mentioned, is the oxo-biodegradable plastic that does not need special conditions to disintegrate, but sadly it disintegrates into microplastics. So smaller and smaller and smaller plastics, and it just goes away. The highest quality of the compostable bags, even the home compostable ones, are actually shown by research to not disintegrate just like a plastic bag in the guts of sea turtles. Happy to share that research paper with you guys. I have it directly from the researcher, so not even coming from a horse's mouth, not even coming from like a Chinese whisper. In the gut of a sea turtle versus a plastic bag in the gut of sea turtle, same disintegration levels. Nothing changes. So these bags are not helping marine animals. These bags are not helping any wildlife. Which is the reason why biodegradable bags, all these classes of biodegradable eco-friendly bags, were actually banned by Australia when they banned their plastic bags. They get wet waste in those, they've stopped accepting wet waste in those bags now, because those bags, they're not home compostable. They can only be composted in an industrial composting facility where they kept at 1.6 atmosphere pressure, so much temperature for 60 days, 45 days, 90 days, whatever be the timeline, right? My question is that especially because I think it was a slip of tongue in your case where you said biodegradable or compostable, please let's not use these terms interchangeably, because we're trying to establish the understanding with people what compostable truly means, and sadly in the market today they end up seeing compostable on bioplastic bags. So because your products are biodegradable,
No, I'm very clear that they're compostable. Yeah. So that's what I kept saying, is that you put our products in soil, even at home, you don't need an industrial composting facility.
So maybe either say home compostable or maybe just say biodegradable. Because your products, even when they go in with wet waste, they will still biodegrade in, let's say, 60 days. About the same time as an apple.
Once they come in contact with soil,
they
turn into compost, yes, within 90
exactly.
days.
So, which is similar to biodegradable. Is closer to biodegradable as compostable terms in India. Because what they're doing with compostability in India is bioplastics. And sitting on this panel, it's not, I was seething when you guys were using the terms compostable.
We can see that.
Because, no, because sadly, if eco-entrepreneurs in India do not push that terminology differentiation, then we're not setting the right example. Then we're not doing a good job of making people understand that, hey, by the way, that bag that you're picking up is not going to be environmental.
Understood. Thanks for sharing. Let's hear it from her. And there's always a scope of correction, right? No one is perfect. So I'm glad you brought it up. But what's your name and where are you from?
I'm Rita Malik. I'm the founder of a company called The Happy Turtle. I actually work on reducing plastic consumption with reusable, sustainable alternatives.
Okay.
So bags might be a good option for me as well, but...
You should have had her on the panel.
I saw her on the delegate list, but the panel was closed by then.
Her products on the Imagine
Yeah,
not
so-
out there.
Oh, lovely. Okay, we'll check that out.
The products are there with Shailaja.
Sure, and I think all of us would love to connect with you after the discussion. Thank you for your insights. We appreciate that. Yes, please.
I have a question for Rhea and Udit. And
So you can take the mic now, please.
quantities or numbers or money, rupees, because I'm interested in knowing how you're scaling and how does that compare with the things that you're competing against ultimately, which is in your case of eco-ware, tableware, it is the entire set of plastic, styrofoam and all the other bad things that we're talking about. And in your case also ultimately, how's the scaling happening? And number two, I'd like to understand a little bit on when you are trying to compete, how are you trying to compete against the larger enterprises which kind of like don't play by the same rules of handling their the damage. Like you guys are handling your, you're not trying to damage. Like the ground reality of our lifestyle and production and industrial production is that nature is free. I think that's where it all comes down to. When you take nature as free, that's where you are the free nature concept is subsidizing production. So I'd like to understand from both of you your current scales and how you're planning to scale further, so that you can ultimately be at the same scale as the alternatives that we are fighting against.
This is a very different industry altogether, which is the single-use plastic. So that is probably growing at about 1 million times faster than we are. Right now, that is the first answer. The second answer is we are trying to increase our, as the normal business does, increase our production and distribution channels so we can reach more people. And there was a third question too, right? Sorry.
No, I was trying to understand, your plans on growth, basically. Like, are you taking this as a regular business, or is it like still only going to be staying a social enterprise for a long time? That's because, and this is for all of you, like, when does it stop being a social enterprise and becoming an enterprise which is competing against, like, as an enterprise against any other? That's my question.
When I started this business, I didn't look at it as a charitable or social enterprise. I looked at it as a business which will generate profits, which will go back into creating more products and growing further. So from my point of view, I'm not approaching this as a social enterprise. I'm approaching this as a regular company trying to make products that are better for the environment.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So to answer the first part of your question, which was scale, to give you an idea, when I started this 10 years ago, I was 20 people, 2 machines. And we probably did about, maybe about 60 tons of material a year. We now do close to almost 2,000 tons of material. I had a distribution network. When I started off building my distribution network, I started off in Delhi NCR and kind of grew, to neighboring states. We now have 28 distributors across the country, and not just. So, for instance, in Karnataka, we have obviously Bangalore being the hub, and then we've got Hubli and all these other places as well. So we're trying to penetrate deeper beyond just tier 1 cities. We've also started retailing online. So I think, it was similar to what you said, where you didn't have to convince anyone. So we listed on Amazon. And we had orders from, Ara and Behrampur and, places I didn't expect. So that obviously then encouraged us to kind of reach out to end consumers more, build our own third-party platform. Where we want to go from here is obviously, there's a couple of things. One, I want to find more applications aside from tableware, right? So we can, with any lightweight electronic packaging, etc. So where we can keep using agricultural waste. So we've played around with different fibers, like I said, the wheat, rice, sugarcane. We're currently doing we've got a tie-up with IIT where we're doing a lot with paddy straw to help kind of, again, solve this whole pollution burning issue, and see if we can turn that into a consumer product somehow and, give value not just to the farmer, but again, to us, the environment, health, pollution, all the rest of it. So does that answer your question on scale? Yes. Okay. And I think your second question was challenges on how, compared to other businesses that are much larger and not necessarily ethical. I think, it hit home when you said ethics. When I started this, I was very clear that this is what I want to do. And there was authenticity with me, my product, anyone I interacted with or anyone that used EcoWare. And I think that's always been part of our core, and that's what we've wanted to do. So what anyone else is doing or not doing, really I'm not worried. I've got my head down doing what I want to do, focused on my vision. And I know where I want to take this company, and we've seen we've seen the growth, we've seen the change in consumerism, the behavior, the demand, and this is the future. No one's going to ban this sort of product. So, not bothered honestly about what anyone else is doing.
Love the answers from both of you. In Hindi they say "Sar jhukao aur kaam karo," right? So very well said. So before, I think we have one. You can take one last question, please. You have to keep it very brief.
Can I?
Sorry. You can take the mic. We have a mic there. And I'm sorry, we'll address your question as well, but maybe like during the break time.
Actually, this is
we're all at your service.
I'm from Delhi. Actually, it is not exactly a question.
Okay.
You told that there is less than 20% are to be only awareness program has been done. But my point is, for every seminar or from every awareness program, is there any action taken report? Awareness to action?
Yes.
Is it been
Very
done?
good question.
So if it is done, I think the result will be better.
So, sir, I'm completely on board with what you're saying, but I think you have, please complete your question, then I'll address that.
Number one, from awareness to action. Suppose any seminar or any awareness program we are doing, we should see the result after that also.
Definitely.
We are not doing it. Number one. Number two, suppose giving any punishment, we should give the motivation. Suppose if you do like this, it should be, you will be awarded. And the punishment should be replaced by the motivation.
Right.
Number three. And number three, from international level to the ground level. So we should start from the ground. The users, they should be given proper substitutes of the plastics so that they can improve.
Sure.
Thanks.
So I'll quickly comment on that, if you guys don't mind. So the first one that you mentioned is about. The second one was about the scale. What was the first part of it? Awareness to action. So see, one of the things, I'll give you an example. Let's take an example of the same event. And so when we were planning the event, our biggest concern, and why I primarily came together with We Prospers and Namita, was that we had been attending events in this industry for almost 10 years, right? Attending 12 events a month. You're talking big things, meeting people, but there is no action driven. At one point, you just go to conferences just to hear the same thing out from the same set of speakers. And so that's when we came together as to bring something, like bring the people who really need to be heard, number one. Number two, that you don't stop at an event, like we'll not stop tomorrow, and I say this time and again, our event will actually begin tomorrow, right? Because it's the first edition. So we are planning to do a white paper, like you might have already heard, and that is one of the formal things to drive action. But we'll be working very closely with all the people who have come up with ideas, whether it's ideas on the table, but also people who are voicing out their ideas, who already have built something. The purpose is to scale. So in the background for the last couple of years, we have been working on driving scale. But the point is, this is to formalize the entire movement and make sure that the scale gets to the next level by these people coming together. Right now, it's a very fragmented industry. So action is definitely on our mind through one of the things as white paper, like I said. And from an international to a local level, that I think definitely we need to think internationally, but act locally. Because, for example, let's say if these are the products that are working in India and there are many more, a lot of them, let's take another example. You see, organic waste composting is a very common thing in India these days. Everyone is talking about it, which is good, but not everyone is talking the right thing about it, which is bad. They have incomplete information. They're just because Noida authority has mandated you to install a composting machine, you spend 50 lakhs and get something which doesn't even work. It gives you compost which is not compost, it's a soil moisturizer which rather eats up on the productivity of your soil. But would a resident welfare association guy know that? Are they even present here? You know what happened when we called 50 RWAs across Delhi for this event, and when the team was calling, they were like, such events are not relevant for us. We are here to manage the facility and the administration. While it takes an effort, we have been doing a lot of other small events in RWAs as an organization. But the point is that realization and the need to learn is still lacking. If some of you are still part, let's say, sir, if you happen to be a part of any RWA, I'm sure you will add that value. That let's evaluate technically correct, not commercially correct. Right now it is like looks like the cheapest option. Let's get some CSR funding and let's get the work done. We are covered. That is the intent, and I think that has to change. And for that, again, it boils down to education. So I'll close that thought here and we can discuss later if needed. I hope that addresses your question. Okay, thank you. One more question, the last.
That in the complete process?
Mine is a very short answer. We send it to a cotton waste recycling plant, which then tears it up and makes recycled cotton out, which again then we use for our bags.
So with us, we, for instance, if the product isn't well finished or whatever, there's, it's the finished output isn't 100% and doesn't pass QC, it is reused, recycled as raw material. So there is no waste on that end either. Oh, sorry.
So in our case, since we anyway work with waste, so we always work backwards. What is the waste available? From this, what can be made? So if we have, say, a big patch of fabric waste, we convert that into a product, then we say, okay, this is scrap which is left. Now from this, what can be made? So it's always reverse design for us. We don't fix the design first. We see what is available, so it's always working backwards so that we ensure there's no waste at the end with whatever we do. That's what
That's
all
important.
about.
Yes, thank you.
Eligible for all of us. Please come up. And I would request Namita to come in and hand over this award to Richa from the Happy Turtle. See, I already remember you.
Products are available at what stall?
At what store? Reimagined. I'm learning the most out of this conference, I guess.
By evening you would have.
And I'm sure he doesn't
forget.
I think it's the cover we have the question.
Yeah, you better
Cover was the question, which I have a lot of questions for her.
Thank you, Richa, for bringing the knowledge that you brought for us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's hear it for her. Please, thank you.
But not just for
Thank you so much.
I would now,
or sometimes just put it
just like that and always the support. Thank you, Lakshmi, for being here.
inspiring events that support individual expression and create products that let you be you. It is all these things that make us